IVM.
Hey everybody, we'd like to welcome a new sponsor, Storytel. Storytel is an audiobook streaming services for mobile and tablets. If you haven't heard audiobooks before and you're a podcast listener, audiobooks are probably right up your alley. You can enjoy your favorite titles when you travel, exercise, or cook. There are great books over here, like the Percy Jackson series is available if you want like some new fantasy, or if you want to go for something old school or classic. You can get either Bram Stoker's Dracula, or you could get Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter series. Download Storytel today from the app or Play Store and enjoy a free 14-day trial. That's Storytel, Storytel. Storytel from the App Store or Play Store. Download it today.
In 2 seasons of the reDiscovery podcast, Ambika and Hoshna have taken us to nooks and crannies of the country to experience paths less traveled, understand vibrant cultures, and gorge on food they couldn't get enough of. This season, they introduce you to people and organizations who strive to make a difference in the way we experience and look at travel. This is the reDiscovery podcast.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about how one family in central Kerala is trying to preserve their traditional home and stay true to their way of life. So one of our favorite aspects of travel is going into villages and towns. And I'm sure you guys know this by now. I mean, we love interacting with locals. We love staying with them, learning about their way of life, different customs, traditions. But also what we really, really love is looking for and checking out old homes. And staying in them, if possible.
Staying in them for sure.
Yeah. I mean, old homes, I think Hoshna and I are both suckers for. The older, the better. The slightly more rundown also, the better. Though we're really, in awe of people who manage to maintain these massive old homes in today's day and age, because they're quite expensive sometimes. So it's a shared love that we both have, that we've found on our travels. And we really love these old homes. I mean, they're beautiful, they're different in different parts of the country. The style in which they're set up, the furniture, the tiles, whatever, they're all a little bit different. But also I think what we really like is that we're like, okay, this old home has a certain type of veranda or a certain type of design, and let's steal this design for when we build our home.
Yeah, so I mean, both of us have grown up in cities. So, when you go out into these towns and you see these massive mansions and people who live in them, they have this style of life. Everything seems to move at this sort of unhurried pace, very relaxed.
A lot slower in the villages.
And I mean, it also gives you this impression that things have been the same there for a while. Not much has changed in their way of life. And, I think we both like that. I mean, I would love sitting on this veranda and growing old, sipping on, old monk, growing old, sipping on old monk. It's like this fantasy idea that I have.
So, I mean, whether it's these, big Chettiar mansions in Tamil Nadu or the cotis of UP or these Portuguese homes that we've seen in Goa, I think we love them all. So last year, in the monsoon, we were on this trip through Kerala. It was kind of a different sort of a trip.
Yeah, it was, not, focused on the backwaters like most Kerala trips are,
or
and stuff like that.
Wayanad
it was more around the art and culture of Kerala. So we saw a lot of different art forms which normally you don't associate with or think about when you think about Kerala. It was outside of, things like Kathakali and stuff like that. And along that trip, what we also did was we visited a lot of these old traditional homes.
The Namboodiri Brahmin homes.
Namboodiri Brahmin homes, the Tharawads of the Nayars and stuff like that.
So these old homes, they are all over Kerala, like many parts of the country. And so we stayed in several of them. So the Namboodiris are an interesting community. I mean, they were amongst the richest and most powerful of the Brahmin communities in Kerala.
Yeah, and they were a pretty small community. They migrated from Karnataka, but they were pretty much only 1% of the population of the Brahmin communities in Kerala.
And so I think what happened was once they migrated, they became advisors to the kings. They started consolidating power and they gained a lot of influence through this. They also gained a lot of money through, they own a lot of land. And so they became this really powerful community.
Yeah, they also, they were patrons of the art.
They were educators.
It said that they were basically the people who set up Kathakali in Kerala. Obviously, the art form always existed, but they patronized it and sort of promoted it to bring it to the state where it is.
They patroned it. They didn't patronize it. No.
They patroned it, correct.
Yes. Yeah, so there's this one family, the Olapamanna family, which is an old Brahmin community family that were the family that where Kathakali sort of grew in their home, and they also sort of patroned a lot of music and poetry that is now very big in Kerala. So some of the more famous poets and the musicians that have come out of that state found space in the family home of the Olapamannas, and we actually stayed with the Olapamanna family which is in the Palakkad district. Their home is over there, so it's pretty cool. We also stayed with another Namboodiri Brahmin family.
The Maranat family, which is another, large important family in that part of Kerala, and that's the home that we are going to talk about in this episode.
So a lot of these homes have courtyards in them, and there's homes in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, I think even in Gujarat, Maharashtra, where central inner courtyards are a very common feature of homes in India.
All homes have these courtyards.
Yeah,
some of them have
hot
one.
areas. Yeah.
Some of them have one. Some of them have more than one.
Some have two. But the Maranat family, whom we stayed with, has 4 courtyards, which you have to imagine. These are 4 courtyards inside a house.
Yeah, so you can imagine how large that house is.
Yeah, how large is it? Do you know?
They start, I think, around 15,000, 20,000 square feet.
Yeah,
that's the average size of
normal
a
house. Yeah, okay. So why not? If you've got all that money and all that land. But the cool part about the Maranat family is that it's one of the only living 4 courtyard homes in the
state. There's a word for it, right?
Yeah,
Padinarkette.
Yeah, so that means actually 16 corners. So each courtyard will have 4 corners, and 4 courtyards, so 16 corners. And I think the cool part, which we really wanted to highlight over here, is one is that it's this living Padinarkette, and there's the family still lives there.
Yeah, there are a few of them around Kerala even today, but most of them are in a fairly dilapidated, rundown condition.
Right,
which is what makes this one unique.
As to how they've managed to not only hold on to their home, but continue a certain traditional way of life. There's obviously the modern aspects have come into their way of life, but it's still traditional, and they've carried it forward, and they've sort of ensure that it will carry forward into the next generation. And I think that's kind of the cool part, because you see all these homes that have or these families that have fallen apart because they can't afford to maintain these massive houses.
Yeah.
Not everybody's an Ambani.
Right. So, to give you a little context, back in the day in Kerala, these houses weren't like massive as they are, I wouldn't say now, but as they were 150 years ago, because at that time there were kings in Kerala and royal families. And
who generally had the biggest homes in the area.
And you couldn't build a home that was larger than the king's home, because that was sort of insulting, and you might lose your head for that.
Yeah. And that was generally practiced in southern Kerala. And the kings at that time were, you had the Travancore kings, and you had the kings from Cochin. But this family home, the Maranat home, is in central part of Kerala.
You had the Zamorin rulers there as well. But, it was only after the Zamorins lost power to the British that these houses started growing in scale, because obviously then there was nothing to stop these rich Brahmins from building large, ostentatious houses.
Yeah, and it wasn't just necessarily for them that they were building the homes. Obviously, they had large families. But it was also that, they supported massive communities around them, because they'd have all this land that, I don't know, 100, 200, any number of people were working on. And the house became very much a part of the village. A lot of these communities, a lot of these Brahmin families would build the temples, which became the temple of the village.
Yeah, so they sort of became the center of life in these villages. They became centers of art, of education, of learning.
Some of them would build schools. So they'd have these, big homes that fed themselves and their families, but also supported, massive staff. So, they were employing people and livelihood and all of that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of them sort of fell apart after independence. One reason obviously was the fact that people couldn't afford to maintain them. And that sort of came from the fact that after independence, you had things like the Land Reform Act coming in, which meant that a single person in Kerala, for example, a single person couldn't hold more than 7.5 acres of land. And a lot of these families lost huge estates overnight, and due to which
literally overnight.
Their main source of income used to be agriculture. And at that point of time, when the grain stopped coming in because they didn't have the land to cultivate, they didn't have the money to maintain these houses, and they sort of fell apart. Another reason why obviously this happened was because back in the day when you had large families, each person had 8, 10, 12, 15 children.
Right.
And the house tended to be then divided amongst the children. And obviously once that happens, it becomes difficult for people to maintain because everyone has to contribute. There are disagreements on how to go about the best way to do it.
Yeah, people move, they migrate. It's the usual stuff. Nobody wants to go back and live in the village, which means then they don't necessarily want to maintain the home. So we've seen this in other parts of the country. And there was also the rare case when maybe there was no sons were born and all the daughters would be married off into other families and there was nobody to, pass the family home on to. So that was also a problem. And which is something that happens even in Kerala, though there are communities that are matrilineal in Kerala, but the Namboodiri Brahmins don't follow that system.
Yes, the Manantham family was sort of lucky in that respect because they...
No, not so much. Lucky, yes, but also a little bit smart.
Yeah, they managed it well. They managed to retain large parts of their land. And also, at that point of time when this system, the Land Reforms Act was happening, the patriarch of that family at that time happened to be the only son.
Right.
Which it's sort of... That was lucky to that extent because it meant that the house didn't get divided.
Yeah.
And this gentleman was a visionary. At that time, he realized, he saw around him what was happening to other homes of his community. And he took a conscious call at that time that he needed to do stuff to protect his home, to make sure it didn't go the way of other homes. And he himself had 6 children. But he sort of encouraged them to institute a system.
He had more than 6 children, but he had 6 sons. Yeah.
But he encouraged them to institute a system where the house would not be sort of divided amongst the sons. So what he did was he actually bought properties for all his children outside of the main home. And
because a 4-courtyard big house wasn't enough.
Because it wasn't enough, of course. And he sort of instituted a trust where the house became a common space to be shared by everyone but not divided. So that system today has sort of held them in good stead because what happened is because the house was a common space and not to be divided.
But not just the house. I think their temple, that is the family temple, the school that they run and some of the other property has all come under the trust.
So the trust manages it all. The house is not divided amongst the children.
And there's no major financial burden on, like the eldest son, for example, or any one of his sons and their children and their family. It's all maintained. Burden. It's a shared burden, which is much easier.
And because they retain a significant part of their land, the income to maintain the house through agriculture continued to come in. Even today, the Manantham family, the house and the trust depends on agricultural income. So they have large land, they have banana plantations, they have a number of other fruit trees, they grow rice. They have about 25 acres of rice cultivation that happens. And all of that income goes towards upkeep of the house and for maintenance and of the family temple and the school that they run as well.
So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Did you know India's most popular music festival was in a way conceived in Estonia? We speak to someone who knows a thing or two about making the NH7 Weekender happen.
Did you know that some termites in Africa have a pleasant minty flavor? And just as well because we might all be eating them in a few years anyway.
Did you know that the world's greatest collection of human knowledge got its initial funding from a porn site? That's how Wikipedia started and we tell you how it works.
Hey, I'm Chuck.
I'm Naren.
And I'm Sriket.
And together we're
Simplified!
Your fortnightly look at burning issues that you should know about.
Told to you in a way you'll understand with humor, bad jokes and PG Wodehouse references.
So that you can look smarter with minimal effort.
We're smart, funny,
erudite and wise.
And ultra-crepidarian.
Wait, what's that?
To find out, tune into our show. Episodes out every fortnight on all podcast apps near you and on the IVM podcast app as well.
Oh yeah.
Welcome back to the reDiscovery podcast. So it's kind of cool because now, so this gentleman, Mr. Vasudevan,
who's a great grandfather of the present generation that lives in the house.
So this gentleman's grandson Praveen, whom we met when we were staying in Manna, was telling us, and we learned, is that this current generation, so the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren now, are all still in agreement that this is a system that they are willing to keep, which I think is really cool, because it's not, every day that once the family spreads, people migrate to cities, they migrate to different countries. Are they willing to come back and sort of do their part to make sure that this piece of heritage and tradition doesn't just fall apart, or it's like, he'll take care of it, my brother will do it, or my cousin will do it, and I don't have the time. Everybody puts in the time.
Yeah, but the unique part about this system, besides the fact that obviously the cost and all is shared because it's a common space, is that every family of the original 6 sons needs to live in that house for a year. So what they do is they actually uproot their lives, come and live in this house for a year. Their children's schooling is changed to the school in the village. Their families come with them, and they have a responsibility for that 1 year to live in the house and to maintain the house.
Yeah, so it's on a rotation basis.
Yeah,
and now out of those
they move
6...
ahead, you have the next family who comes in. So effectively, one family lives in that house every 5 years.
Yeah, because of those 6 sons, there is one is no more. So there's 5 of them.
And this is what was really fascinating, because in today's day and age, it's really difficult to imagine someone, putting their life on pause to go back to their village and live in their home to preserve it and maintain it.
But it is fascinating. But I think because it's not like you have to do it every year, and your turn probably will come only once in 5 years, or you could, pass that job on to your son, if you have a son or a grandson, depending on how old they might be, then the cousins are doing it now, or the second cousins are doing it. So your turn will probably might just come only once in like 7 or 8 years, and it sort of, I think, makes it a little bit easier for someone who says, okay, I need to give up 1 year of my life, but I can do it because everyone's doing it around me. And this family seems really close knit, because when we were in Maranat for those few days, there was a new baby had been born, and a lot of the family had come from various parts of Kerala and India to come together for this, this celebration, and to meet each other. So I think that was kind of nice, because if you can, you go and visit a new baby, but you're not necessarily there immediately. So you can see how close the family is. And I think that's all of it is sort of a testament to this gentleman who sort of brought them all together.
Yeah, and it's great because that is happening because the house itself is beautiful, right? It's huge. It's a 20,000 square foot house.
Yeah, it's got really worth saving.
It's got like 20 rooms. Back in the day, in the 50s, there used to be about 60 family members who would live in that house, and for those 60 family members, they had 30 to 40 servants who lived in the house.
Yeah.
And they have this huge kitchen, which is the community kitchen, which is used not only for the family but for people who come from outside, for villagers who come to the house, because it was like a community center. Their family private temple was sort of a village temple in a way. And even today, you will have devotees coming in from all across just to pay their respects at the temple.
Yeah, I think today we heard that there was about 100 people come every day to visit their family deity, who is Ganesh. And so in the kitchen, I think the prasad is made every day, still in that kitchen, and the unique part of that house, it's got the 4 courtyards, it's got these massive columns and long corridors, and in very typical Kerala style, there are sloping roofs on the outside, and all of this was designed in a way to keep the temperature and the climate of Kerala in mind, and so very cleverly done. So it's very cool inside the house, no matter how hot it is outside. The roofs keep the rain away from the inside.
And if it gets hot, you could always jump into that pool that they have at the back.
Yes, of course, because all of these houses have these Olympic-sized pools.
So these are traditional bathing pools. But they're so huge, you can't imagine that's only used for bathing.
And important rituals. Yeah,
but they're all attached to the back of the house. Obviously, we as guests couldn't go and take a dunk in it because it's used even today for the family for bathing. So you'll have separate sections for men and women, and before any of the morning prayers happen, you must go and take a bath in that pool. it was quite a lovely way of life.
And
I
it's
thought.
all green and really nicely shaded. So really beautiful. And lots of these houses in Kerala have them, but this pool was particularly a large one. And I think like all the other homes in that region, it's made with laterite rock.
Yeah, most of the homes in Kerala are built with laterite rock. It's abundantly available in those parts. The floors are usually mud, and then they're coated with cow dung,
Right.
because it's believed that it has antiseptic properties and it keeps the germs away, I guess.
Yeah, and it's also pretty smooth and cooling.
Yeah, and the houses were all designed
under your
keeping
feet.
Vastu in mind.
Right, of course.
And obviously, these were old agrarian families, so they had cows. So the cow shed had to be in a particular place as per Vastu, which is considered very important for the well-being of the house in general. And all these things today have been maintained.
Yeah.
None of that has been changed.
So I think that's the cool part, is that they're sort of ensuring that certain customs and traditions stay alive, and not only for them, but for others who want to learn and understand how these communities used to live 150 years ago, which doesn't sound that far back in time, but given the way change is happening today, I think 150 years or 200 years is quite a huge time gap.
Absolutely.
In that sense.
And to give others a feel or a view of how they live their lives, today they've also opened a homestay. So whilst the homestay is not in the main house, it's in a sort of outhouse right by the old house. So the outhouse back in the day used to be a granary. It was also
with
where
the men's quarters above
it was
right?
also where the men of the family slept. So back in the day, in the house, you'd have one room in which the patriarch of the family lived with his family. You had another room where all the women lived together.
The older women would sleep in that room.
Yeah, and you had the outhouse where the men lived, basically where the men slept.
Yeah, so they didn't have concepts of, like everybody gets their own bedroom. It was a very community-oriented concept, yeah. So all the young men would be in this outhouse, which is above the granary of the main house. And that has now been converted into a homestay.
Yeah, so Praveen, the host of that homestay, he was in the Merchant Navy, a sailor. He came back to his village about 10 years back.
He's the son of one of the 6 sons.
Yeah. And we asked him, what made you come back? 15 years, 20 years in the Merchant Navy, obviously you were doing very well. And he said that he felt that it was about time he came back and started contributing to his family and to his house. He wanted to spend more time with his children and his family who lived around there. I guess
in the house as that they were given. Sailor, he couldn't be with his family all the time.
Yeah, and he thought it was, this is a good time to do it. And he requested the permission of the family trust to convert that outhouse into a homestay.
Yeah, I think the reasoning for that is because the trust, it's the trust of family members, but because the family home is their home and it's been their home for 160 years, he wanted to make sure that, even though they have people from outside coming and living on their property and you eat over there with them and you can wander around the outside and they'll take you inside to see the house. But it shouldn't, invade in anyone's privacy.
Yeah, the sanctity of the house needs to be maintained.
And the temple and everything.
Even today, they're very particular about what areas you can go into the house. It has 4 courtyards. One courtyard is only for the women. In one courtyard, they have an inner well inside the house. One area is reserved for the temple and for the deity, which is Ganesh. So
one is their snake grove.
Yeah, it's a representation of their snake grove. They have a platform. And so they've tried to hold on to that and at the same time open themselves up a little to show other people their way of life. So they have 3 rooms in this homestay, which is in their outhouse. And Praveen makes sure that when they run the homestay, he's pretty much with you all the time.
He's there.
He's always willing to share information about the house.
And his wife is also there.
And they're always with you at meal times. And
the meals are all really yummy. And I think if you've heard even one of our episodes or been on our blog, we love yummy food. And this is one thing that we love to talk about. And the food there is very typical of the food that, they'd be eating in the main house, for example. It's very typical Namboodiri Brahmin food. You eat on a banana leaf. And it's all vegetarian food for anyone who wants that information. But it is yum and it's different. I mean, you get some of the same sounding stuff, like you'll get your rice and your sambar or your rasam and your vegetables, but it's all made a little bit differently. A lot of the stuff that is grown on their land. So you kind of get a taste of what they would have been eating for the last so many decades.
70 to 80% self-sufficient for food. So most of the rice that they eat comes from the farms and the family. All the vegetables that they eat are grown on the property. Most of the fruits are grown on the property.
So all organic.
All organic. They have their own cows, so milk, ghee, butter is all made on.
And it's nice, yummy ghee.
On the lands of the home itself.
So Praveen makes sure that he's there with you, and in that sense, the homestay doesn't run, 365 days. I think it's only about 100 days of the year, because the other times of the year, he's sort of involved in the school and the day-to-day activities of the house as one of the family members who lives in the region.
The school also is very interesting. It's, Praveen referred to it as one of the earliest public-private partnerships in education.
Yeah.
Because
but that's pretty unique in Kerala, actually.
So when after independence and the first governments of Kerala decided that they needed to push education,
the communist government,
in a big way, and that's why today you see Kerala as one of the most literate states in the country, but they didn't have the money to do it, so they requested rich families to give them land to set up schools. So what happened was a lot of these rich Namboodiri families and other families actually set up schools on their own properties. They paid for the infrastructure to build the schools, and the governments paid for the teachers. And this system continues even today. So even today, the school on their land is effectively run by them, with the government contributing the salaries of the teachers, which I think is it's an awesome system.
Yeah. And we saw several other schools when we were traveling around Kerala that have the same system. So their school was built in 1953, I think, is what he had said. And it's up to the 7th standard. They have 1,500 kids. And you can go and, have a look at the school also. And so Praveen is involved in that. And then he runs the homestay. And the great part about living there, which is where we stayed for 3 days, is that you sort of really get to understand this community's way of life, which is little bit similar to other Brahmin communities in the state or even in Tamil Nadu, but a little bit different because they've got their unique customs, their unique characteristics. Of course, this Kerala style of house with the slanting roofs is something you'll see in a lot of places. But the Namboodiri home again has its own unique little bits and pieces. And it's the last living Padinar Kat in the state. So one should go there just for that, to see the 4 courtyards. Though in your tour of the house you can only actually see 3 of them, because one is exclusively used by the family. So it's kind of their private space. If you want to experience this very interesting, unique culture and way of life and understand how it is possible through a little bit of, I think, unique innovation and creativity to sort of carry forward this tradition and preserve a certain type of heritage, head over to the Maranat Manna.
The Maranat Manna, which is in central Kerala in the Malappuram district. It's on Google Maps. So
Maranat Manna. So that's
it's about 2 hours from Kozhikode Airport, so it's not too far. You can catch a flight down to Kozhikode. And
so the Maranat Manna is MARANATMANA.com. So their website will give you all the information, and you can get in touch with Praveen for your bookings and everything. They have 3 rooms, and it costs 5,000 a day with all your meals.
Yeah, the only
included.
request that they have is you book at least 14 days in advance, so that they can make sure that Praveen can make sure he's available when you're there,
right,
to give you the full experience.
Yeah, and you definitely want to have him there for the full experience. So for more stories like this on our favorite places to visit around the country, if you want some tips, if you want to learn a little bit about Hoshner's photography, and lots of other stuff, head over to our website. That's reDiscoveryproject.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And you can listen to the complete first and second season of our podcast is also on our website or on the IVM website. I think that's it for this episode.
So thanks for listening. Happy travels.
Happy travels. For updates about our show and other awesome shows, follow IVM on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. at IVM Podcasts. You can also listen to our show on the IVM website, app, and any other podcasting app you may prefer. The reDiscovery podcast is an IVM production. If you like this show, also check out The Seen and the Unseen, a show hosted by Amit Verma, where he discusses topics related to economics, politics, and its impact on our society.
As you can see, we have a podcast listener in his natural habitat. Billions of years of evolution have led him to this point. He's on his way to work, and listening to podcasts makes his miserable day better. He will now head to work and use all his knowledge to communicate with other colleagues and possibly future mates. You can find more of his species on ivmpodcasts.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out all the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.